It is Tuesday, the 7th of May, day 43, and I am with my good friend, the wonderful Nathan Taylor, Sockmatician. Oh, look, your head looks so... and bless you for staying up so late. It is midnight for you in London, and I really do appreciate it. So good to have you.
Might be midnight, but I wouldn't be asleep by now anyway. This is sort of ordinary timing for me, so I'm perfectly happy to be up and see everybody. And good morning Thursday, even though it's still Wednesday.
I know, and it's such a it's been so good that you are such a night owl, which is wonderful. And we have been trying to pull this together pretty much for the last 4 weeks, which is great. And we're here now, and we have, I mean, we're going to try and keep this to an hour, you and I, but that could be, to use a really beautiful, delightful parlance, pushing shit uphill, because I know what it's like once you and I start talking. We could be...
You certainly are not lacking in that department either.
I know we're both bad enough when we do these on our own, let alone once we get together. So, I hope you've got your coffee and scones, people watching, because you could be in for a long haul. And it is so good to have you here. And I thought it's a really great opportunity to be able to talk about your journey in knitting, because it has been, I've talked about this a lot in the Quarantine Diaries, is that we learn so much, and I have been stunned at how much in knitting I have learned in the time that I've been knitting, which is a really long time, but I was stagnant for such a huge chunk of that. Like I just didn't really push any boundaries whatsoever, and it's only been in the last 15 years that I've done that, and it is just such a wonderful thing to do. Now, you've compressed that to a degree, but you started knitting very, very early on. I mean, I know that you were knitting as a child as well, and it was something that you greatly enjoyed. So give us an idea of your journey.
Well, there's been 2 stages to my knitting journey. Let me just get this light switched out. I started knitting as an 8-year-old child, and apologies if my internet is a little bit juddery tonight. I don't have the best service at the moment, so I'm hoping people can hear me, even if I'm a little bit sort of flary. I started knitting as a child. In fact, I have my very first ever knitted item here. Many people will know the story already, because I do bring him out quite a lot. But I have an older sister, as many people will know, who, by the way, Maree sends her love. I've spoken to her this evening, and she says to everybody who knows Sock the sister out there, she sends much love, but she is not a night owl. She's at the other end of the day, because she has to get up early, because she's...
Yes, her and I often have early morning conversations, and it's usually around the time that she's getting out of bed. So it's hilarious. She'll put me on a video call, and she's getting dressed and changed to go to work while her and I are yabbering. It's hilarious.
The dynamo, she never stops, but she wants to wish everyone, even though she's completely in bed, hi Margot, she wants to totally to send her love. But my knitting journey started because of her. She was given a kit to make a Pink Panther stuffy toy by, I believe it was my Auntie Sheila and Uncle Kenny. I think they gave it to her as a child. And being the younger brother, I wanted to do everything that my older sister wanted to do. So I said to my mum, I want to make one. And she said, well, unfortunately, there's only enough needles and yarn in the kit for one toy. So I was devastated, and my mother dug into her knitting kit. Now, she can knit but doesn't enjoy it. I think she felt that she needed to when Sam and I were babies, because of course it was the 70s and you had to knit for your children, otherwise you were a bad mother. So she wanted to do that, and we didn't wear many. I don't remember any knitted items from my mother, but she still had a box which had in it various knitted, like old bits of wool and needles that she had. So rather than finding, I'm imagining it was written for a DK weight pattern and pink and white yarns in the colours of the Pink Panther, she found me some very large needles and some very fine green yarn. It's sort of fine fingering weight yarn. It's a dark green, and I do have right here as an 8-year-old child, my dark green Pink Panther, what I did knit, my very first knitted object, and I love him. He's adorable, but he's not without his problems. You can see there's more stuffing on show than there is actual sort of skin for him. And if I bring him close to the camera and show and stay very still so it doesn't blur like that, there you can see he's all holes. I basically knitted a dark green string vest, but you know he's got shaping, he's got an embroidered face, and he's very much a pink, well, a green pink panther. He doesn't have a third leg. That is his tail. It was sewn on a little bit lower than most tails should, but let me tell you, Mrs. Dark Green Pink Panther has never complained about that. So that was it. I mean, but literally that was it. I had only ever knitted that, and I wasn't interested in knitting particularly as a kid. So that was 38 years ago that I knitted him. I'm 45 now, and I was 8 years old, so 37, 38 years ago. And I swear this room's getting darker. I'm just I've got a problem with my lights, and I'm just going to sort this out for you because my lights should be up there. That's better, isn't it? Well, that's gone very pink. It's ridiculous. How about that? There we go. Now people can see me. So I wanted I had done it. It was a box that I had ticked, and I moved on to other things. So I didn't knit again until about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago now. I keep forgetting to update the story. So probably 8 or 9 years ago, 2011. Yeah, so 9 years ago, I think it was that I was bullied into learning how to knit by two friends of mine who are keen knitters, and they were adamant that knitting would suit me, that knitting was something that I would enjoy. And I was just as adamant that it wasn't. I said, I did it as a child. I've got a toy. I'm really not interested. And they kept on at me for about 6 months. And they were basically saying, but Nathan, your brain is the kind of brain that would really, really enjoy what knitting is. And I said, oh, don't be ridiculous. Knitting's all sort of soft and fluffy and cushions and 70s jumpers that nobody wants to wear anymore. And I said, I have a very mathematical, scientific brain. And they were like, aha. So I still didn't believe it. I still didn't get it about knitting particularly. But eventually, just to shut them up, I'll backtrack. I was saying to them things like, I I couldn't imagine anything that I could make that I would want to wear, so I didn't see any point in doing it. I was under the impression that men have a more uncomfortable relationship with hand knits than women do, and I think that's probably still largely true. Um, to people, to the uninitiated, to men who don't understand knitting and don't know what it is, then I think that's definitely true, which is why most people end up knitting in grey, navy, black, and browns for the men folk in their lives because that's all they will dare to wear. I'm now not that person at all. I think since I'll jump forward a bit, but since learning to knit, I have developed a completely different appreciation of colour and of my own self-image than I did than I had before. So I said to them I didn't want to knit anything, I didn't want to make anything, and then my friend Sam, not my sister but a male knitter friend Sam, said, "Well, how about socks? You could, you can be as bright and
Oh,
garish
you want. Mm.
as you want because you're going to hide it in your shoes." And I was like, it still didn't buy me. I wasn't sold at all. But I said to him, okay, just to shut him up, teach me how to knit a sock. And he did. But interestingly, he didn't give me a pattern to follow. What he did, and this is the genius that I thank him for the reason why I'm sitting here now as a designer and someone who is quite so obsessed with knitting as I am, he, rather than give me a pattern to follow and the skills I needed to understand what the pattern meant. Rather than that, he explained the geography and the structure of a traditional cuff down, heel flap and gusset construction sock. So I understood the engineering of it.
Yeah.
And the first sock I made was from that. It wasn't from a pattern at all. It was the first pair of socks I made were just from the numbers and from what he told me about turning a heel, about picking up stitches for a gusset, and working all the different things that a heel flap and gusset sock construction requires, which meant, I think, the reason why I'm sitting here today And what didn't happen was, as with our friend here, when I said, "Oh, I've done that now, I can move on," I could easily have done that uh, um, with a sock. If he'd given me a sock pattern, I'd go, "Okay, done." But what he did was he gave me an understanding of the engineering, as I said, and that
Mm.
understand what it was that I was doing, and it made me think that, oh, if I don't like this sock pattern, then I don't like that one either, but I could change that and make it my own. And I started customizing and designing, self-designing, or just sort of making up. It's funny, isn't it? Designers call it designing. People who don't call themselves designers call it making up.
Making up.
This is
Well,
exactly.
and also, yeah, and I mean, let's face it. I mean, knitting is catnip for the mathematical mind when you think about it.
I now know that. I didn't at the time. I didn't realize
Yeah,
it. Formulas, patterns, literal patterns.
ratios is the one I work with a lot, and because I cook, as you know, I cook a lot as well, and in cooking there's a lot of work with ratios. So you work with either balancing with flavors or ratios of flavors and ingredients, and knitting, and especially socks. Socks is the first perfect thing to start with, because any sock is based on a ratio between width and length and cuff, and
The
it is
whole
just basic
body,
maths.
the whole body is based on those ratios and similarities between things. And I knew things about that, but I didn't really appreciate it fully. So, for example, if you want to know the length of your foot, but you don't have your foot to hand because you are out and about wearing boots and it's raining, you don't want to take your boots off, the length of your foot is the same as the crease of your elbow. From the crease of your elbow to the crease of your wrist. If you bed your heel, I'll do it this side. If you bed your heel there, your toe will come directly to the point there. So that's exactly the same length, and it always is. And coincidentally, it happens to be the same as the depth of your head as well. So if you put your chin, if you can get that into the crease of your elbow, the top of your head, the crown of your head comes to the crease of your wrist. So the whole body is based on proportions and things like that. Another thing, oh, this is the most exciting thing I learned. When I was, for people who don't know, when I'm not a knitter, I'm an actor and singer, performer, I work in musical theatre. And I was singing on a cruise ship, and we were doing a guest slot. There were four of us who were doing just songs from the shows, and we were doing a very short cruise. We started in Riga in Latvia, and we went sailed to Klaipėda in Lithuania, and then we had a day at sea, and then we got off the boat somewhere in Germany and flew home. And when we were in Klaipėda in Lithuania, we got off the boat and went into the town, and there was a craft fair there, and there was a little old lady. She must have been at least 80 years old, long white hair in a braid that was sort of worn over her shoulder, and wearing black clothes. Obviously, I'm assuming to denote widow status. And she was knitting traditional Lithuanian socks, which tend to be natural cream color, thick socks, and around the cuff they would have. It's a stranded pattern, but it's not like a fair isle pattern. It's usually just a dark black, and it may be reindeer repeated around or something like that, something figurative rather than geometric. Um, and I wanted to support her because it was clearly something that she was doing to support herself. And I wanted to buy some socks, but I didn't want to take the risk that I would buy these socks and they would fit me. So I obviously speak no Lithuanian. She spoke not a word of English, and so I was trying. I picked up a pair of socks that I liked the look of, and I was sort of holding them up and pointing at my feet and making size shapes. Like, do you think it will fit? And she looked at me and she understood what I meant, and she grinned, and she grabbed my hand and she made a fist like that with her hand and pointed at me, and I made a fist like that with my hand. She picked up the socks and wrapped the foot of the sock around my fist, and when the toe and the heel met around the back like that, she put her thumbs up at me and nodded. And that is how she finds out the sock that will fit. So I didn't know that was a proportion as well. So if you get any of your hand knit socks that fit you perfectly, wrap them around your bunched up fist, you'll find that the heel and the toe will meet perfectly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. So then you did a lot of work with socks. You designed a lot. You developed Sockmatician, which is a combination of your love of socks and your love of mathematics.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to sort of jump in and say to Christine Gisler, who's saying the length of your foot is the length of your wrist to elbow crease. That's long. It's like, yes, I know. It looks preposterously out of proportion, but I guarantee you almost it will be to the millimeter. It absolutely works. If you measure from crease to crease and then measure the length of your foot, you'll find it doesn't look like it should, but it really does.
And you've got to remember Leonardo da Vinci, wasn't it, who figured out all of these ratios back in the day? The great Leonardo. So, this is, and you forget that these concepts have been around such a long time. So you've love of mathematics, love of socks, did some designing. How did you then transition across to double knitting?
Well, I was never planning to be a designer, ever. It's just that I started making my own socks according to things that I wanted. And I thought, oh, my first ever design was a pair of socks called Cancello, Cancello, which are available on Ravelry, but it's very basic. I don't expect anyone will ever want to buy them. I think the reason why I'm a designer and the reason why I did any of this at all is thanks to the fact that the first thing I made was socks and not a hat. If I'd made a hat to my own specifications, I would have gone, oh, look, I made a hat. To quote Stephen Sondheim, if I made a hat where there never was a hat. Yes, I know, Julian, everyone's doing this now. It's like, trying to get their feet in their elbows. So I would then have gone, oh, look, I've done it. Great. The thing with a sock is you need a second one. And so what I had done is, in order to get to the same, I had written plenty of notes from what I had done. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't ever have bothered to go back afterwards and write up the pattern. So I literally looked at that and thought, well, okay, well, these are notes were enough for me to make a second sock from. If anybody else wants to make these, I could tidy them up and it could just be there. And I thought, well, and then I learned how to use Ravelry, and I thought, well, it has taken a little bit of time, so I'll just put a little charge on it and see if anybody ever wants to make it. I stuck my neck out on Twitter back then. I wasn't on Instagram back then. On Twitter, and I said, would anybody want to test these for me? I had about 10 followers, and 2 people got back to me, and the first one who got back to me was the person who has become my lifelong tech editor. So she's more than just a test knitter, and she has tested every single pattern I've ever released personally myself, including my book later on. So that's how I started with the designing. And I did do quite a lot of socks to begin with. I moved away from socks when I discovered double knitting. Double knitting, for me, for anyone who doesn't know what double knitting is, it's a reversible 2-sided fabric, usually in 2 colors, but not always, stocking stitch on both sides. And you can do extraordinary things with double knitting. You can incorporate absolutely any other knitting technique in there and actually take away all the limitations of each technique. Because double knitting will make it reversible, double knitting will make it with colors, and it's absolutely wonderful. Hello, Paula. Hello. How's life in the shop in Carpety? And I hope you're, as a post office, Paula, are you still staying open? I don't know. Maybe
no,
you
actually, as a post office, no, I don't think she is actually, because I know Paula and I have been chatting. Mind you, I think Paula, I do know she does do some mail orders, so I think she's been able to do that. Yeah.
I met Paula when we left. We drove up from where were we? Dunedin, was it?
Oh, were you in Wellington? You would have gone up from Wellington to where Paula is?
We drove up from Wellington and drove up through there on our way to Newfoundland. So that's how I got started with all of that and the designing. Double knitting arrived in my life like a bolt from the blue. I know that sounds kind of crazy. I was at a local shop that we were just having a knitting afternoon. We used to get together on a Monday afternoon, and a lady walked in who was wearing the most extraordinary cardigan, and it was 2 colors. I'd never really seen anything like it. I was such a beginner knitter. I was literally making a vanilla sock because that's basically all I was doing at the time. And I just looked at this cardigan, and it had like a cityscape design all over it. So the road going around the waistband, and skyscrapers and buildings up the side, and birds, clouds, trees, traffic, amazing. And then she took this cardigan off, and as she opened it up, you could see that the colours were reversed on the inside, but the pattern was still there. And because of the subject matter, it gave the illusion that the outside was the city by day and the inside was the city by night. And because she was an evil genius, all her seams were reversible. So the entire garment was entirely reversible. And literally my jaw fell into my sock. And I sort of burbled at her, what is this crazy sorcery? And she said, it's called double knitting. I said, and how on earth do I find out how to do it? She said, go home and look it up.
As any great mother or teacher will tell you, go and look it up for yourself, child.
Quite right. And you know what? I'm so glad that she did. With what I later learned was her characteristic brusqueness. What she had done, if she said to this beginner knitter who didn't really have much of a way of visualizing or imagining what was going on, if she had said, oh, you do this and you knit this one and you bring the answer one, you purl this one, you do that one and you change the colors, I'd have gone, oh, okay, thanks for the explanation. And my brain, I swear, would have been happy that the explanation had been given, whether I understood it or not, so I would have felt satisfied. But actually what she did was she sent me home with a thirst to know more. And the interesting thing was, this is the bit I can't explain. I knew right back then, right at that moment, I knew that double knitting was something I really, really wanted to get into. I didn't know what was possible within it. I had only ever seen this one thing. But when I was researching some stuff online and I didn't do any practicing, I sponged all the information I could find from all the different sources, which there weren't that many, and there still aren't that many resources for double knitting now. And everything I could find without ever casting on. And it was 3, maybe 4 months of doing this like obsessively and sponging up everything I could find before I thought, I'm ready. I'm going to cast on. And I know what it was. I didn't want to risk learning it wrong, messing it up, and getting frustrated with it, and perhaps not wanting to continue with it, because I knew it was going to be something that was going to be with me for a long time. I just knew it. So the first thing I ever cast on was a scarf that became Perplexus, which I don't have to hand at the moment. It's in a different box somewhere else. But it's a scarf which has got a repeated square pattern, which is 2 different versions of the same optical illusion. And it's a bit of an eye boggler, but it was a big project. I didn't swatch, I didn't make a pot holder, I didn't make a little swatch or anything like that. I just jumped in with my own design of a scarf, and that's not because I think I'm brilliant or I wanted to be cocky. It was because I'd taken the time to learn everything really, really thoroughly before, and I got to the stage where I couldn't resist casting on. I was so ready, I needed to. I'm so glad I did it that way, because if I had got to a stage where I'd maybe learned from somebody who didn't explain things very well and hadn't known things, maybe I wouldn't be interested in the thing which gives me so much pleasure today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, you've also just given us a wee window into your personality as well. Because it is, but the thing is that it spoke to you. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, often when we go with knitting, we can go down these rabbit holes of different things that we love and we enjoy. And it often will reflect the things within our own personality, but that's what I love, is the infinity of it. There is so much. There is so much there.
Never ending. I mean, I know you've recently spoken to Suzanne Bryan.
Yeah.
She and I have become quite close over the last few months. She first contacted me last November, I think, and asked me to do one of her interviews on her off the cuff Saturday interviews. If anyone wants to do that, Suzanne Bryan off the cuff, check out her on YouTube. She's absolutely brilliant. She recently interviewed Lucy Neatby, and she's also interviewed Alistair Post-Quinn, who are 2 of my double knitting heroes. And she keeps saying, she comes to my Thursday, I have a Zoom meeting, which is a really terrible time. I don't know if you guys in
I think I snuck in once when I was making coffee to come out here, and I was kind of like in and out. Hi guys. And then
I do them every Thursday night, so tomorrow for me, but later on for you, at 8 p.m. UK time, which is 7 a.m. for you Friday morning. Is that right? 8 p.m.
Yes.
for me is a.m. for you Friday? Yeah. So if anyone's around and wants to come to my Zoom meeting, you're more than welcome. It's open to everybody. But Suzanne often pops in, and the two of us start geeking out about stuff. For anyone who doesn't know who Suzanne Bryan is, Bryan with a Y, not with a B, but it's got a Y in the middle. She is one of the people who put together the course to become a master knitter. So
Yeah, I had Suzanne on 2 weeks ago, and she is just genius.
She and her brain and my brain work in very similar ways.
Yeah.
We love the engineering of knitting. We
Yeah.
love the architecture of it and what it actually is. And she and I can geek out about stuff forever and ever and ever. But
she's the only other person that I know that, well, Charles is the same too, to be fair. I mean, like, you were showing me some swatches, which we're going to get to soon, but she will sit there, like she was saying how she was, one of the projects she was working on was going through and knitting a series of swatches just using the same weight of yarn, but putting it through a whole variety of different situations. So knitting it plain and testing it unblocked, then blocked, then knitting it, then unraveling it, then re-knitting it and testing the gauge, unraveling it and taking the kinks out and blocking the yarn and re-knitting it, and literally every permutation that you could possibly believe she was doing, and then to test the gauge to see. It's like this complete Galileo approach to swatching and knitting, but you've got to have people like her doing that, because without people doing that and testing the knowledge, how would you know? I mean, it is part of the experimentation. Yeah.
Got the time and she's got the brain for it. And I see Margot saying, I'm Suzanne Bryan's #1 fan. But you were also moderating for her, weren't you, on my interview with her?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I've got a funny feeling, Margot. I've got a funny feeling Margot's in her knitting circle anyway. So it's exactly. So it's brilliant. So so we've got our double knitting. I think we need to get on to show and tell, because I know you have wonderful bits and pieces there to show. So let's start looking at some of the samples that you've got, which actually then I know really beautifully show the journey around double knitting from the beginning all the way through to some of the majesty of what you've got right now. So I'm going to jump back to the big screen so we can see some.
My second ever double knitting project was the Sanka scarf, which looks like this. And it's long, and it's got these wonderful black and white geometric patterns all over it. Sanka is a town in. Actually, do you know what? This is probably a good idea for me to cut to my other camera angle. How about that?
Yes.
Why don't I just put that out of the way?
Everyone, we had so much fun yesterday. We, other than the fact that Nathan and I had a huge chat to catch up, we were playing. I know we were playing around with all this technology. I mean, as I said to him this morning, I have learned so much in the last 6 weeks. It's amazing. I've come this far.
How about this?
Oh, close up cam.
Hang on. I'm on the wrong app. Hang on. Let me get back on. How about that? There we go. That's what I want to show people. So this is the Sanka scarf. Sanka is a town in which way are we going? Sanka is a town in Scotland, which has the tradition of using stranded knitting rather than double knitting to create these wonderful patterns in gloves. They're usually they're stranded gloves which are all over one of these patterns. So I've chosen lots and lots of different patterns here. So this would be one of the patterns. This would be another one here. I've chosen to try and showcase as many of them as I possibly can throughout this scarf. They've all got wonderfully evocative names. There's the Duke, there's the pheasant's eye, the rose and trellis, the drum, the cornet, the glendine, the midge and flea. There's wonderful, wonderful patterns like this, wonderful names like that. And then what I wanted to do was to incorporate as many of the different aspects of the gloves themselves in this scarf. So the gloves always have a corrugated rib cuff like this, and they always have a wristband as well, which shows the initials of the wearer. And I've got NJG there, which are my real initials. Taylor's a made-up name because I'm an actor. But the joy of double knitting, which some people don't know what it really can do, is what double knitting does is it reverses the colours on the other side. So where we've got this wonderful black outlining here, and the framework is in black. Turn it over, we get to see the patterns in a completely different mood. Everything looks entirely different. You might think that those the lettering would be backwards on the other side, but look at that. No, it's still N, J, and G there. And if I turn it over, you can see it's N, J, and G there. Now that's just one of the little magic touches that double knitting can give you. And when I say magic, I really do mean it. I'd love to explain how it works to everybody, but actually I'm under contract. I can only share that information when I'm actually on site at Hogwarts.
Of course, of course. But it's just, for me, that as your second project. So how long did that take? Because that is a labour of love.
I was working on this for probably 3.5, 4 months.
Yeah.
And it was, and with a couple of pairs of socks on the go as well. But it's knitted a very fine gauge. This is it's probably actually easier than the other camera. I think it's slowed down too much. This is knitted. I think it might be 2.75 or 3.25 mil needles with it's Malabrigo sock yarn in the natural and the black colours that they do. And it is really fine gauge. But what a lot of people are often surprised at, because they think, well, okay, well, it just looks like Fair Isle on two sides. Well, one of the things about double knitting which makes it so completely different from Fair Isle is its ability to do this. And this sometimes freaks out some stranded knitters.
Yeah.
Stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch. And it really, really does. And then it just bounces back into shape. And the reason for that is because there are no floats in double knitting. There are obviously in stranded knitting, you've got the active yarn, which is making the shape of the knit stitches on the front, and the passive yarn, which is just going shkumph across the back. Incidentally, shkumph is the Norwegian word for float. It's not, I'm lying. So, and it's the straightness of the floats which gives a rigidity to Fair Isle knitting, and also gives the stitch ratio and the gauge to aspect. The aspect ratio of the gauge from stitch to row makes Fair Isle stitches almost entirely square. That's certainly not true in double knitting. They're usually much, much wider. So these shapes here, they look like rectangles on this scarf, but they are actually 11 stitches by 11 stitches. So they would be square in stranded knitting. So there's lots of things that make it different. But the one thing,
Rachel's just popped in the comments that she's actually bought the yarn for that to pluck up the courage to start it. But the thing is that I'd never done any double knitting when I'd met you, and you'd come around for dinner, and for me, wine was involved.
Yes.
Because I do some of my best work under the influence of Chardonnay, and I've got this is what you and I did.
Oh, that's so cute.
And it's what you said, with the stretch. And I mean, this was literally what, you and I, 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, and for me, the eureka moment was actually how straightforward it actually was. I mean, you've got to just stop tripping over your own mind.
Yes, and you've got to stop thinking it's hard as well. The first lesson I always teach the first thing I say to people when I'm teaching a double knitting class is I always say to them, now I know a lot of people will get very intimidated because they see the results can be amazing. So they think, therefore, it has to be really, really difficult. And it's really not. It's knitting and purling and moving yarns backwards and forwards between the needles. That is genuinely all it is when you're doing something like this, which is just different colors of stitches on a grid. It is so easy to do. There's genuinely nothing to be intimidated by. What can go wrong? It's knitting. There's zero jeopardy. There's absolutely zero jeopardy. All you've got to lose is some time, and you've never lost the time because you're always learning.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a rather large dog trying to break in. I think he heard your voice. Our Rufus adores Nathan. I know, and he literally busts through the door like, "Where's my friend?" It's like, ah! Now,
as Del is saying, you only ever do knit one stitch at a time, and so with anything, double knitting is only ever one stitch at a time. You just have to, if you get a little bit confused, you just finish the stitch you're on, have a little breather, look at the pattern, look at your notes, whatever, and figure out what the next stitch is, and then just do that one. It can be as slow as you like. It doesn't. There's no race and there's no knitting police.
So let's have a look at some of now the exploration moving forward. So you've got some straight double knitting, and then of course you combined to another really popular stitch and technique, which is brioche. So let's sort of transition there, because this is when things start getting really crazy and exciting.
Before we get to double knitted brioche, because that's kind of the end of my journey. Well, it's the most current side of my journey. One of the things I like to tell people about double knitting is it is the best knitting technique there is. Now, you notice, I know everyone's going, ah! Notice I didn't say I believe it's the best knitting technique there is, and I didn't say as far as some people are concerned. I just say outright it is the best, because there is nothing that you can do in single face knitting that can't be done in double knitting. And if you think about what double knitting brings to the table, it brings reversibility. So there's no ugly wrong sides, which makes it perfect for shawls and scarves and things that don't have a private side, the way a fair isle garment would have a private side and a public side. Uh, you have the opportunity to have the reversibility and bring color. So if you're talking about, for example, my shawl here, which is called Genesis, and one day I will write up the pattern. This was an exploration for me of lots and lots of different techniques and things that you can do with double knitting. So you'll see it's not just straightforward pictures on the surface of the thing. You've got some lace techniques here and some lace up here. You've got bubbles going on here, bubbles there, and of course the beauty of things like this is unusually, you've got a green bobble on an orange background. Now, that doesn't usually happen. Usually, bobbles are the same color as their background. But being double knitting, this is all completely reversible. If I turn it round in the same spot, you've got orange bobbles on a green background. It's very weird because the screen's reversed. I can't see what I'm doing. But so there we go. We've got orange bobbles on a green background, and they're very, very much proper bobble. You can see how lumpy bumpy they are there. But on the back, you've got the green ones there, and we've got the different lace techniques. So there's this honeycomb stitch here, which is something I devised in a way of using yarn overs, which I'll probably never do again because it's really time consuming and horrible, but it does give this very lovely effect, which again, if you see reverse on the other side, all very beautiful. So there's so many things here, even down to the very end. It's a huge shawl, it's really massive. And we've got lace, and then at the very bottom of it, this section here, these are cables. This is a 1/1 cable with the orange cables twisted at the front over the background of the green bed here. Now, remember what I was saying about double knitting being able to do anything? So we've got lace, we've got cables, we've got bobbles, we've got texture work here, because I've even got, which I didn't show you in that section, this section here, which is knits and pearls, giving different texture here in the pattern. So all of this stuff is amazing.
Delene has just said that shawl should be called Complete Mindfuck.
Called Genesis, and that's because for me it was the start of a lot of new ideas and things that hadn't been particularly well documented, or things that I had taken a little bit further. So to move on from that, using lots of lace techniques, I then decided to sort of play around a bit more with double knitted lace rather than trying to combine lots of different things. So lace particularly is usually a one-sided technique, so it's got a right side and a wrong side, and usually it's in one color unless you're doing stripes, or unless you're doing letting the yarn do the work for you. Whereas I've put together this scarf here, which is pure double knitted lace. So you can take a standard, very very traditional leaf lace motif, and you can bring it to life with color. And so here I've got, the veins of the leaf you can really accentuate by using the different colors, the way you can't in ordinary leaf, in ordinary lace. This would just be a single colored leaf motif, which you would just see the shape of it, but now you can see the structure of it. And if I turn it over, there's no ugly wrong side. I've got brown leaves on a blue background there.
Now, Shell is asking, how do you decide on a colorway when you're doing a project?
I like it.
Yeah, that
That's
makes perfect sense.
that's
Yeah.
generally all it's going to be. I find two colors that I like. Nowadays I rarely use anything more variegated than a semi-solid. In fact, on this one you can see that there's quite a lot of texture and mottling in the brown, although the blue is very it's a hand dye, so it's going to have slight heathering going on rather than being completely machine solid. But it's I still don't want to use I don't often use any. A long color change gradient works very nicely because then you get the colors moving. Something that is smooth, because I think with double knitting um, you're working so hard to put the pattern in, be it either something like the Sanka scarf here, where it's just the colors of A and B stitches, whichever to make up the pattern, or whether you're creating lines by using increases and decreases to make different shapes with the stitches. Either way, you're working hard to build that pattern, so you don't want the color to break it up. We've all surely made the mistake where you think, oh, I love this multicolored speckly yarn and I love this cable pattern, let's knit one out of the other.
Yeah.
And you realize that you can't see the cables at all. You think
Yeah.
that cables are so strong and so bold in their structure, but the wrong yarn can really break that up. So then I moved on to using increases and decreases in double knitting to create this shawl, which
And actually, that shawl there, I think, is a really perfect answer to the question that Margot's asked, is where you get your inspiration, because the story behind your inspiration for that shawl, I think, is stunning.
well, it's a peacock. It's supposed to look like peacock feathers, and it's called Hampton Court because Hampton Court Palace is known for its peacocks, and of course, being double knitted, it is fully reversible. So again, I don't want a shawl with a wrong side. I want a colourwork shawl, but I don't want a wrong side. So you can see on this one, the cables that run down the centre, that's green cables on a blue background. If I bring it nice and close to the camera, you can really see how the stitches, oh, there we go, how the stitches move. The columns of the stitches create the structure of the piece. But on the other side, of course, it's going to be a blue cable on a green background. And that's also true for the edging, which is on this side blue with green stripes, and on the other side green with blue stripes. Can you see that? I can't see the camera. There you go. So there's a lot going on, and this is made with a worsted weight yarn. And a lot of people say, "Oh, but I don't like double knitting because it's too thick." There's no such thing as too thick. If you like something, if you love the coziness and the comfort of something heavy, then you're going to get something that's much heavier. I think I've just answered that, Bev. So the orange one is fingering weight. The lace is also fingering weight. This is worsted weight yarn, and so it's worsted weight doubled up. I wanted to design this because I wanted to show people that even though it's heavy and it's thick, it can still be delicate and beautiful. So you can really you can go to town with the yarn weight if you've got a pattern that will support it.
And also the other side of it is you don't have to use worsted weight yarn if you don't want to. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you are the master of your own destiny. If you want to do that in a double knitting weight or a double knitting for double knitting or a fingering weight, you can. I mean, it
would be smaller. Or now with something like this, I don't advocate really changing the sort of changing the openness of the fabric. So you could say, oh yeah, but I could do it on lighter weight yarn, but I could do it with bigger needles. That wouldn't really work because then you'd see too much of the color on the other side bleeding through the gap. So you do want a nice close fabric or something like this to get the best out of the pattern from it.
Yeah.
So that all leads on to, and of course, other things. Can I just show a couple of other clever things that you can do?
You can. We love show and tell. We lots of show and tell.
So as I've already shown you, the little bit of Hogwartsy stuff that I said, where you've got the NJG on one side, reading NJG on the other. Now there's various names for what that technique is. and some people call it non-reversible double knitting. I argue that that's not accurate, because I think it's even more reversible, because it's, you can reverse the fabric. Some people call it two pattern double knitting, and I would say, well, that's the same pattern just rendered twice, so it's not two pattern double knitting at all. So the name I prefer for it is non-mirrored double knitting, because I think that covers all the options. And in non-mirrored double knitting, you can do some quite extraordinary things. So this is a hat that I put together. It's based on an old Victorian. If I get the light, there you go. So it's based on an old Victorian floor tile pattern. I'm using 3 colours that you can get out of 2 by sort of having the salt and pepper versions here, plus the light colour, plus the dark colour as well. But if you get familiar with what this hat looks like, there's the jog. It's going to be a jog, it's in the round, and that's the crown of it. So if you familiarise yourself and remember what that looks like, now I turn it inside out, and you'll see that it's an entirely different hat on the inside. And that's the crown. Very, very different from what it looks like on the other side of the hat, just to remind you what the other side looks like. This is not 2 separate hats sewn together. This is all knitted exactly as one piece. So that's the outside, as I usually call it, and that's the inside. And even more, so look at how the there you go. Look at the decreases. There's no great big lines of spiraling decreases there. That's not a double knitting there. That's a whole new thing that I was sort of working with, is like invisible decreases, and trying to work out how we can get the 2 different patterns be nice and smooth on both sides. So it's I love things like this. I really, really love things like this.
That is certainly sorcery. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Look at this.
This is my solar system hat. Again, using the whole thing about the different the letters. So this is Jupiter, the great big gas giant. So we've got the sun in the center of our solar system, and we've got all the planets named by their initial letters, working around. Obviously, Saturn's got its rings, because of course it would have, and the big gas giant Jupiter. But on the inside, all of the letters are run the right way as well. So that's kind of a neat, fun thing that you can do with all of this. And then you get, oh, hang on. Then I was experimenting with texture. So this is a recent scarf pattern, which I have yet as well.
I love this, because this in itself it's a journey in a single piece, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. There's so many different things for different textures in double knitting. And see, you can here you've got the lace, which we've been talking about already, and then we've got, this is a mild. Where is it? This is a mild garter stitch. Nope, this is here. This left and right camera thing is really doing my head in. This is a mild garter stitch, which is just holding the 2 yarns together and working.
Have we got the other camera working? Is that not working?
It is, but I realise it slows down. It slows everything down a lot. So it's probably easier to go with this one.
Way.
And then you've got this weird stitch pattern here, which I absolutely love, and I've never seen it anywhere else. I call it Chris stitch. The reason I call it Chris stitch is because once, when I was teaching standard double knitting, somebody whose work I hadn't checked in on for longer than I probably should have done, she said, mine doesn't look the same as everybody else's. And I looked over, and she was doing something which turned out to be this, and her name was Chris. So I call this Chris stitch. And I always swore to her, I said, you know what, it's actually really, really attractive what you've managed to accidentally do. And I've always wanted to design a pattern centered around Chris stitch. So I've done it. So the outside of this scarf is all in Chris stitch, and it's got little Chris stitch patterns here. Chris stitch is kind of like a reversible sort of linen stitch, like a 2-color linen stitch, but with reversible properties. Whereas linen stitch isn't quite the same on both sides. This is. It looks like that on one side, and it looks like that on the other side. So it manages to sort of be linen stitch and 2 colors. So this also, you might recognize one of the other stitches that's in here. This stitch here would be very familiar to most people, or so they think. That's not brioche. Sorry to disillusion anybody. It's not brioche, because it is in fact double knitted brioche. And you may think, well, what on earth is that? It's actually a subtly, very slightly different structure to the construction of the fabric. The yarns don't all go in the same places. If you spread apart double knitted brioche, which this is, and ordinary traditional brioche, as I call it, then you'll see that the yarns go in different places. So it looks very similar, but actually it's not. And the main benefit of double knitted brioche is, unlike traditional brioche, this is done in one pass. So it's done exactly as double knitting, where you've got two yarns on the go at the same time. I happen to use one in each hand. You don't need to do that. You can do it with both on one finger or the other, or you can do it Portuguese. And you can, working both yarns together, you can work across in one pass. And it means you can create a brioche structure in half the time, because you're not having to do two passes for each one. And unlike most brioche, which is not fully reversible, both sides can be quite attractive, but they're not the same. You can achieve 100% reversibility with double knitted brioche, and that's what I'm specializing in at the moment. That's what I'm focusing all my attention on, coming up with all sorts of crazy things, because I'm writing the book so that I can launch the technique as a brand new area.
So I'm glad you brought up the book, because Kylie asked before about where a lot of the patterns that she can get, and I know a lot of the ones that you've actually mentioned just recently, there's some on your Revelry page, but a lot of these you've really got sort of two. You've got a series of probably two books that you'll be able to do. One is just on straight sort of non-mirrored brioche, and you're looking at that, but also to the not brioche, double knitting, and then you've got the double knitted brioche as well. So I mean, the other thing too that you and I have spoken about a lot, particularly with the second, with the double knitted brioche, is for people that don't know, we've worked with Nathan for the last few years in a collaboration of creating a range of hand knitting yarns with him, and we started out with a full play range. And I'm just gonna, yeah, there we go. And I'm just gonna jump this camera back up so we're both there together. There we go.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I kept bleating at you, because we'd catch up frequently and I'd be looking at all these incredible projects, and I would be, for goodness sake, man, you have your own yarn range. When are you going to design and knit something in your own yarn? And finally, it has now happened.
Yes, it has. I have
two things.
I've spent most of the first half of this year and ongoing. I'm writing a book. Suzanne's in. Hello, Suzanne. I'm writing a book about double knitted brioche, and I'm focusing quite a lot of the patterns in it on our yarn, the Sockmatician edition range of the Moody Hughes yarn that Skeins and Maree and I have put together over the last 18 months or so. And one of the things that I am keen to show is how, I've done it basically because I happen to have the yarn, and certainly at the moment with everything in lockdown, it's very difficult to get hold of as many different types of yarn as you might otherwise have done. And I happen to really, really like the yarn anyway. I love the I love the feel of it. I love what it does. I love everything about it. So we've got the two weights, we've got the 4-ply and the DK. And so far, a lot of the patterns that I'm working on, probably about half of the patterns in the book, are made with the DK weight yarn, and there's going to be some 4-ply patterns coming up as well. There's going to be a shawl coming up in it. So shall I show some of the things I've been doing?
Yeah, have we got the phases one? Because I think that's a good one to start with.
Moon phase one is here. So double knitted brioche, being a form of double knitting, the joy of it is that you can really, Pamela's saying, can we see a sock? I really don't do socks anymore. I'm so sorry. The socks is part of my name because it's where I started, and I don't have any hand knitted socks anywhere near me because I had a moth invasion at my old house, and a lot of them got eaten up, and I haven't knitted any socks for a long time, so I can't show you any socks, I'm afraid. But I can show you the moon phase scarf, which begins here, and being a form of double knitting, the joy of double knitted brioche is that you can combine double knitting with double knitted brioche. So here we've got some syncopated brioche, so you can get the two different colors. As you can see, the knit columns of the dark stitches, they don't suddenly become the blue ones, they sit in between the blue ones. Can you see how they transition from one to the other there? It's hard with the light, I'm sorry. But the black columns of knit stitches become the pearl ditches in the next section. But that's just a tiny little thing there. But here we've got a full dark moon there, and as the scarf goes on, we transition through the phases of the moon, working upwards till we get to nearly to the half moon. The halfway point of the scarf is the half moon, and then we travel on and on and on this way to nearly the crescent moon there, and then the pale moon there, and a faux fringe at the other end. So, oh, bye bye, Margot. So this is made with the DK weight. The two colours are Bruton and Diaries. Diaries is the dark grey, and Bruton is the navy blue. I've named all of the colourways in our range. There are 10 colours in total. I've given them all the surnames of prominent LGBT activists and HIV pioneers and innovators over the history of the LGBT movement and the HIV story, because I'm a gay man living with HIV, and that's part of my journey. I wanted to add all of those things in to what I've done. Maree, by the way, was amazing. And when we were putting the yarn together, she was saying, Nathan, you're a double knitter. You want nice crisp lines, because I'd spoken to her about the needs of double knitting. So she added a little bit of extra twist into the 4-ply from what she normally does to keep everything in. And because it has possum fibre, which has a very, very short staple length in it, that extra twist helps to keep the short fibres tucked into the yarn as well. So it's all been very carefully thought through, and you'll see the heathering in the blues. You can see it's not just one colour. We've got this monochrome dyeing here. That was the mottling and the variations to show that even within the LGBT community, that that we still have a lot of individuality, and that everyone is different, and everyone is unique, and everyone is beautiful because of that. So, and the colours are, initially we had the 6 stripes of the Pride Rainbow flag plus a light grey and a dark grey, and we've recently added pink and the turquoise to the colours as well. I've got the 4-ply, Maree's got the DK there. And we've added those because the original Pride Rainbow flag did have 8 stripes. It did have pink and turquoise in as well, so we just expanded the range. There's the plug, there's the blurb. And now, can I show the poncho?
Yeah, please.
So I'm going to move my camera back a little bit to get a little bit more space here. One of the large projects I've been working on recently for the book, with the colours of the 6-stripe rainbow flag, is this enormous poncho, which I have finished very recently, and I cannot wait to show people. This is the first time it's really been shown anywhere. I'm going to be podcasting about this, and here we are. There we go. Oh, it's Steph, it's you. I wondered if Steph Rainbird was you. Steph, hello, lovely. We need to chat. We haven't chatted for ages. But here's the poncho. It's enormous, and it is all done in the lovely reversible, the double knitted brioche. You can't really see anything, can you? I don't know how to get in front of the camera. There we are. It's massive. And if I tuck us down like this and bring this forward so we can see, there we go. So we can see exactly how big it is. And I'm a 6 foot tall man, and it comes down to my knees. So there we are. I'm going to get very hot under here. But I've worked through from the red in the shawl collar there, the big cowl neck, and the orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. And because it's double knitted brioche and you can do all sorts of things with it, what we've got is the brioche goes right to the very end. This whole poncho is completed with a Kitchener graft on 1,100 odd stitches. Don't hate me for that. The question that Deb is asking, how long does it take to knit? About 3 months. 3 months in total. I started in mid-February. The joy of what I've managed to do here, I'm really, really excited about this. There's lots of things that ordinary brioche can't achieve particularly easily. Can you see these lines of centered double decreases here?
Yeah, and that's so crisp
and blip free. There's no tiny little bits of color poking out where you don't want them. Often in brioche with the decreases, you'd see sort of the gray would just be showing a little line either side of the center stitch, but there's none of that going on here. And I've managed to work out a way of having those decreases work their way right. there you go, right to the very, very edge. So the final decrease of that edge there is actually done in the Kitchener graft itself, rather than trying to do anything sort of beforehand. I didn't want to have a little tail. I wanted the lines of the center double decrease to come right to the very edge of the fabric, rather than have a stalk on the bottom. And it is all possible. Now the joy of this is it is 100% reversible. So if I pull it over my head in a different way, you can wear it on the more subtle side, which the grey as the standard colour, and then the colours of the background are much more subtle and can be worn like that. Thank you, Glynis. Thank you for coming along. So there you go. I'm exhausted. It's really hot here. It's enormous. It weighs nearly 2 kilograms.
Oh, it is just it's amazing. So that's going to be in the new book.
Yes, definitely. As will this. This is the cowl that I put together for the book as well, which is really, it's got such structure to it. Most cowls will fall down around your neck. This one will absolutely stand up. In fact, it does stand up literally on its own. You can make it literally stand up on the table like that. And again, the joy of this kind of thing. It looks like it's probably cables. It's not. This is all done with increases and decreases, and just as with all things in double knitting, because the double knitted brioche is a form of double knitting, it is fully reversible. So there's no gaps or blips on the other side either. You just get the grey taking the forefront colour there. There's a matching hat for that, if I can find it. I've got so many things in here. I can't find that hat. I'll have to find that another time. It's buried somewhere in here, but there's a hat which has got a beautiful crown in those colours. Oh, here it is. I've got it. Yep, there we go. Look at the crown on that. Ooh.
Yes, stunning.
I love that so much. And again, just to hammer the point home, it's also just as lovely on the inside. Yes. I know, Steph. I know it's certainly not going to be possible now. I don't think. I'm not even because Steph and I were talking about maybe coming over to get all the patterns shot, because
that would have been amazing.
Here's one of the other patterns that will be in the book. It's again a combination of the double knitting and the double knitted brioche. This is actually an old design. It was in the Knitter magazine about 3 or 4 years ago. But they wanted me to rewrite the pattern for traditional brioche. So, excuse me, I've got hair in my cowl. It's never been available for double knitted brioche before, but it has been available for the other kind. And this has got brioche cables, so that's just standard. But again, it's fully reversible. You can wear it either way out with the colours and the cables going, or whichever way you want. One of the other patterns from the book, I've got 2 versions of it. One which I made a little bit too large, but I do like the colours, so I'll probably adapt this for the book there. In fact, Steph called it, said it looks like YA going around the brim. So at the moment it's called the Yaya hat. Based on what Steph said, and it's got a rather funny crown as well. I think that's.
And I also love the combination between the chapel and the Diaries in that hat too. I like that colour combination. It's beautiful.
Really nice. So that's the Sockmatician edition yarn. The same colour, dark grey as in the moon phase scarf, but that's with the chapel colour. And here's another version of it, which I made slightly smaller and in completely different colours. This is the tailor and the
yellow.
Thank you. Tired. And again, this see the hat here is in 5 sections, whereas the larger version of the hat is in 6 sections. It's essentially the same thing going on. And who doesn't like a muff? So I decided, while I was in Iceland, I wanted to knit something. I thought muffs are sometimes they're open usually at the ends. So this is the cuff muff. And I think that's really rather nifty design, because it's very easy. You can sort of pull one hand out as easy as you want to, and then you get it straight back in there. And plenty of room in there to hold your mobile phone or everything else. But if you can see how it uses different textures here, we've got the double knitted reverse stocking stitch areas here. We've got the crisscrosses, which are from the other hat design there, and that works very nicely as that. There's another version of it, which is I can't find it. Here it is. So I've got a one-ended. So that one I've shown you is the double-ender cuff muff, and here's the one which has got one end is open, and so you can easily just put your hand in for extra warmth, and then pull your hand out, and it's got drawstring. Again, it's completely reversible, but sorry. So if you wanted to wear it that way out, and you could have the drawstring, you could pull it tight. And if you had two of these, you could have one on each hand, which are very useful if you want to then sort of pull them back and wear them over the cuff of your coat. You can do
I mean, I'd be inclined to actually flip them around the other way. I mean, if you were wearing sort of something and you needed an extra layer, you could almost wear them like a fingerless, sleeve.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the other way of using them. So you could have them if you've got a fairly light thing on, but the joy of these is they're going to stop. They're wind baffles as well. So if you've got coats with large sleeves in, you can just wear two of these like that, or you can wear them as something that you can just sort of put your hand in. So it's a very, very unusual item, but it's really, really versatile, and I think it's like really, really handy. And interestingly, there's the same number of stitches around here as there is around here. There's no increases to get from that section to that section. This is just the difference between the gauge of standard double knitting and then becoming double knitted brioche. Double knitted brioche goes wide very, very quickly. Phew.
So I'm just going to do some housekeeping stuff now. So in terms of getting the yarn, if you are watching from the Northern Hemisphere and you're wanting to get the yarn, you're actually able to get it from Nathan and Sam at the Sockma shop, and they ship. What's your shipping situation at the moment? You're obviously allowed to ship around the UK. Are you able to ship internationally?
Yeah, there's absolutely no problems. We don't have any restrictions on it.
There you go. And also, too, do you have the men's knit book as well?
Guys knit, I do. Yes. I shall grab one copy here to show people.
Because that is the book that is currently out, and it's a fantastic gift if you've got somebody, particularly a guy who is wanting to learn how to knit, because I think the concept behind this book is fantastic. You've gone and taken because men do learn quite differently. Anyone that works in education will tell you that boys do learn differently often to girls, and you've gone and written this book in such a way that it sort of really does speak to the male brain. So within the techniques, there you go, there's the
that was still being knitted, the lace scarf, but I've got all the details in there. This is one of my favorite photographs in the whole book. Can you see what the title of the page is? It says Other Types of Cable. And maybe I should probably show my all-time favorite photograph from this book, which is this one.
Because every man has to have a decent pair of balls.
One lady said to me in class, she said, "But Nathan, why are they different?" I said, "Because they always are."
So both of those, so if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, both of those are available from Nathan at Sockma shop. If you want, we don't have the book, but it's also
Hammerhead Shark.
So the other place the book is available from is it Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. It is, yes. So if you're looking for the sort of the cheap option, it'll be on Amazon. I can't sell it at reduced cost because I'm a wholesaler myself. But if you do want it as a special gift, then what I offer is the chance to have an autographed copy by the author. And when you buy it from Sockmatician.com, you can have. There's a little box that you can fill in. If you're buying it for yourself or for someone else, you can write the name that you want me to sign it to, and I'll scribble something silly on it and send it out to you that way.
Yeah, brilliant. And if you're at the bottom half of the world, where I am, obviously the Moody Hughes Sockmatician edition is available from us at skeins.com. And we're now back fully stocked. We were out of Baker there for a little bit, but we are now back fully stocked. And these incredible pins. Look at these. I love them.
That's my little Sockmatician enamel pins. They're also available in the Sockma shop. There's different versions of those available. I've got the white ones. I'm going to do the full plug. I don't care. This is I haven't sold one of these for ages. So these available. There you go. in the sort of more standard version.
Now, Michelle is asking, the Guy's Knit book, is it a good knit book to learn double knitting or double knitted brioche, or will that be included in the new book?
Absolutely not. Guy's Knit is a beginner's knitting book for beginner knitters. It takes you from never having picked up any needles before. This is not a book that I ever thought I would write, because I don't teach beginners how to knit. However, it teaches absolute beginners from absolute total beginnings, and it takes you through some cables and a little bit of lace. It takes yarn overs, increases, decreases, and things like that. But it's not. It mentions brioche and it mentions double knitting, but it doesn't give you any indications on how to do those. Those are much more advanced techniques, and that's a very beginner's book. The double knitted brioche book that's coming up will be a full tutorialized technique book, a reference manual for it, because it's a brand new technique. It's something that doesn't really exist yet, and it's going to be fully done. I've spent the whole day today knitting these 3 ostensibly identical swatches, which are all, I can't, there's something weird about the lights in this place. The camera's always adjusting. So that one, and that one, and that one, and they look exactly the same. They're not. They're 3 different ways of doing the same type of decrease, so you get a different finish. And if I just quickly point out, you see on this one, you can see there is that little pale purple blip down the side there. Oh, I can't do the left and right, so this finger. So that little pale purple blip that's getting in the way. Whereas on these 2 versions, that blip doesn't exist at all. It's gone completely. So it's different ways of achieving the same thing with slightly different effects. So it's a very technical book. I'm writing it at the moment. It will be out later this year.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. It's been an absolute delight. I know we could go forever. We could go forever, you and I. But I think the nice thing is we're going to keep the quarantine diaries going. Not every day, but I will certainly keep them going at least. I'm aiming for twice a week, but we'll see how that goes, maybe once a week. And you and I will definitely be back in touch. Now, this one I love, and we have to mention this because this is some yarn. So when Nathan came to visit, this was yarn in the skein shop, and he was quite, I mean, for anyone that's visited our store will know we have these crazy bins and washing baskets full of insanely priced yarn. And Mr. Magpie over here got totally drawn by this neon yarn for, I think, the pricely sum of $1 a ball.
It was, yeah, it might have been, yeah.
It is.
It's amazing.
And in fact, to the point, there's a 14-ply yarn, because is that one going in the book?
Possibly. It's such a simple design. However, it uses exactly the same techniques as the moon phase scarf. So it is a little bit of a duplication. It might be there to see something. I might put it in just as a little curio, because it's a nice, quick, easy, really very easy, simple pattern to make, because there's no increases and decreases. It's just about transitioning from double knitting and into double knitted brioche.
And it's actually probably the perfect first pattern for a lot of people too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the jury's out. The first pattern might just be some simple wrist warmers with nothing going on apart from getting to know the technique. But
right, well, thank you very much. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. It was so wonderful to see everybody. I, of course, will be back again tomorrow. What I'm going to talk about, I have absolutely no idea, but as usual, I'll come up with something between now and then. I'm going to let you get back to bed, my friend, because it is certainly a very late hour for you. So thank you so much. I will see everyone again tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.